I'm Patti Williams, and I'm a member of the Houghs Neck Garden Club, in charge of this, our 10th anniversary celebration. And as part of this celebration, because the garden club started at Nut Island, we thought that it was appropriate that we celebrate Nut Island as well as celebrating our anniversary. Many interesting events took place on Nut Island that people don't really know about. And one of them, I mean, people walk by this sculpture, whatever, all the time, and they don't really know what it is. These are the remains of cannons that were tested on Nut Island. It was for the Civil War, where they were made by the Alger Iron Works, which that later became the South Boston Iron Works, and they were a major supplier of cannons and cannonballs and projectiles to the U.S. government. They made cast iron cannons, and they originally, in the early 1800s, tested or proved their cannons in South Boston. But as that neighborhood grew and more people lived there, they couldn't continue to test their guns there anymore. So ultimately, the testing ground was moved to Nut Island. There were some fishing shacks on the island that were cleared out, and the government started to do ordnance testing. In the 1860s, a technological change happened, and that was the introduction of ironclad ships. Previous to that time, ships were wooden hulled, and they had cannons on them, and if you were in a fight with another ship with a wooden hull, you had a cannon that had a smooth bore, just basically a tube, and a round shot would be fired through the cannon, and it would go through the hull of the ship. That didn't work with ironclads because the cannonballs would just bounce off. They couldn't penetrate the iron. So a new type of defensive weapon had to be built, not only against the Confederacy, but in Europe at that time. The Europeans were testing guns made out of steel, and the United States didn't have a steel any kind of steel industry at that time. So what they were doing was they were looking at could they take the cast iron cannons that they have and rework them so that they could penetrate the ironclad ships. What they did was they had the cannons and they rifled the bores. So rather than a smooth bore, they rifled them. They put spirals in them, because if you put the spirals in them, it helped the projectile fly straight. They also developed projectiles with a point. So these big cannons were tested with these kinds of projectiles in order to penetrate the sides of ironclad ships. So they brought the guns out here, and they tested them. And they tested them, and the target you can see across the bay is Prince's Head, which is part of Pedix Island, and you can see where the guns hit. That was one of their targets. And in fact, one of the projectiles actually flew over and hit way on the other side of Hull. So they did all this gun testing. Ultimately, what they found out, it was a real big disappointment, because these guns were made out of cast iron, and the cast iron was not strong enough to withstand the huge force of the new projectiles, and they pretty much all blew up. And soon after that, then the United States began developing its own steel industry, and that's when guns became made out of steel. But I will read you one quote. That was from a book called The Islands of Boston Harbor by Patrick Conley, and he said, "Truly, this small green island enters a great deal into the patriotic annals of the United States. No more important contribution to our progress through the centuries of war and defensive reparations is recorded." Who knew?